Welcome back. We are, if you're just joining us, broadcasting on Bloomberg at Founders Forum. Thanks for being with us for this next session. I've got the pleasure of introducing one of my most talented colleagues, Mark Bergen. I'm sure he's been calling some of you for his scoops, and if you haven't read them and his long reads in Business Week, you've been living under a rock. He's going to be interviewing three big names in tech who Bloomberg has chosen as our leaders of UK startups to watch. We have for you, coming up, Sir Colin Humphreys, one of the founders of Paragraf, Nadine Hachach-Haram of Proximie, and Phillip Belamant of Zilch. Welcome to our panel. I'll hand over to Mark.
Thank you so much. These were three finalists from our inaugural Bloomberg's UK Startups to Watch, which we're doing again this year. So those of you that invest in startups, run a startup in the UK, please, I think you can apply now, is that right? You can apply now. So I, as you can probably tell, I'm from across the Atlantic. One thing when I moved here more than a year ago, and there's a lot of people have asked me what's the difference in the kind of tech scene, and one thing I think I return to a lot is this: what you have in the UK is you have this really interesting collection where, as compared to the US, say we have financial innovation that we would have in New York, we have some of the life science innovation that we typically have in, say, Boston, and we have the innovation in actual silicon that we have in Silicon Valley, all here in this lovely cold island. And today we have this really fascinating group that represents all that sort of, we have deep tech, we have healthcare, and we have financial services. And I think we can all call you three at this point scale-ups. It's a strange term, but it is in that, you stepped out of the startup. You're probably getting asked questions about IPOs at some point. I'm going to let you do a quick rapid-fire intros. If you can, do like an elevator pitch version of what the company is, and then briefly why you chose to be based in the UK. I'll start with you, Philip.
All right, great. So my name is Philip. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Zilch. We offer free and affordable credit to the mass market consumer, but it's not what we do that's very unique, it's how we do it. And so what we've created is the world's first ad-subsidized payments network. Effectively, we drive customers to shop, we make ad revenue from that shopping from the stores, and we use that to subsidize the cost of credit to free for consumers at scale. So today we have about 4 million customers in the UK. We grow by about 100,000 customers a month, and we've done around 3 billion of commerce through the platform and growing.
And why the UK?
And why the UK? Very quickly, we felt that the UK was, and particularly London, was such an interesting place to start and found the business. You've got deep pools of capital in the UK. Today, the technology space here in the UK is third largest on the planet, only second to the US and China. And you obviously have such an amazing group of people from all different walks of life, background. And so we really felt that if we want to build a product that's truly aspirational, we want to appeal to lots of different types of people through the product and proposition, you need to have a team that represents that so you can build those things inherently into the product.
Nadine?
Yeah, hi everyone, my name is Nadine Hachach-Haram. I'm a practicing reconstructive plastic surgeon here in the NHS in the UK. And as a surgeon for over 10, 15 years, I was really frustrated with some of the challenges we were facing firsthand. For those that aren't so familiar with operating rooms, these are expensive assets for hospitals. They deliver life-saving or life-changing care to patients, and yet they are incredibly analog. We don't really understand what's happening between one room and another. There's a lot of variability in care, variability in outcomes, variability of access. And so I started to imagine a world where we could deploy a software technology that could work in any operating room, in any procedural room, where we could connect, collect, and activate knowledge and information and individuals to really deliver best practice, high-quality productivity, high-quality care to patients all around the world. And in these incredibly analog environments that have a very diverse type of devices in the room, there's almost $500 billion worth of devices in operating rooms around the world, we needed something that really worked as an operating platform that worked with everything. And so we brought our solution into the operating room. We bring applications to that platform, things like telepresence, where I could virtually scrub into someone else's operating room and share best practices. Things like content capture, capturing all the sensory data in the room to better understand how the room is utilizing information, how the turnover time in the room is, what instruments are being used, and ultimately how we looked at quality, safety, training, and outcomes alongside that. So really turning these rooms into smart, intelligent, data-driven rooms. And of course, as a practicing surgeon, what's important ultimately to me is that then delivers the best care to every patient, no matter where they are in the world. And we are in over 1,000, close to 1,000 facilities in the world. We've done over 80, 90,000 sort of video cases on our platform. And we work with, hundreds of thousands of surgeons really around the world to deliver that. And why the UK? One, I'm a practicing surgeon here in the NHS. I'm hugely passionate about what we're doing here in healthcare and what we stand for. But I think we are a technology that is global. We're in over 60 countries. So being in the UK, being in London, definitely offers that capability to be a global business because you have links all around the world from where we are. I think the talent pool is incredible, and we really rely heavily on great engineering talent, which we're able to recruit here very, very well. And I think we've been able to access global capital despite living in London, and that gives us a lot of flexibility as well. And of course, there's an element of sort of the cost of that high quality labor here versus doing that in Silicon Valley or Boston.
Colin.
So I'm Colin Humphreys, one of the founders of Paragraf. And 20 years ago, two Manchester University scientists took a plot of graphite. Graphite's the lead in your pencil. And they put sticky tape on each side of this block, and they peeled off layer after layer after layer until they got a single layer of graphite called graphene. And graphene is the thinnest material in the world, and it turns out to be the best electrical conductor in the world by a big margin, much better than copper or silicon. And so people said, this is going to be the wonder material. You're going to get fast computers, 2,000 times faster than present-day computers. The problem is they had tiny flakes of graphene when they did this peeling off. And so Intel, IBM, and Samsung together put over $5 billion trying to scale up. And Paragraf, I was in university at the time, I had two postdocs, and they developed a new way to make graphene, large area graphene. And so we've solved this problem of scaling up graphene, and our mission is to make graphene useful for electronic devices, and that will transform the world. So that's what Paragraf's mission is.
And I assume you're in the UK because you spent out of Cambridge, is that right?
Yeah, I was in Cambridge at the time, and I've now moved to Queen Mary in London. And we spun off, we're in a village like this place. Or shall I just say? So we went to Cambridge Science Park, very expensive, £100,000 a year rental for what we wanted. We go to a village called Somersham in Cambridge, and an innovative farmer in Somersham said, I'm going to create big sheds on my land, put sheds. He's called it industrial park. The rent is 1/10 of the rent in the Cambridge Science Park. So if you're entrepreneurs, you want to start up, look for these sort of low rent places, a big shed, and we put, porta cabinets inside, we've got clean rooms inside, and it's in Somersham in Cambridge. That's where we are. Yes.
Yeah, you all, I think we all need to be less afraid of the microphones too up here.
Oh, yes.
But, you all mentioned talent as one of the reasons here. Has that changed since Brexit?
For talent?
For hiring, yeah.
Yeah, it has changed. I mean, it's much worse now since Brexit because, Brexit was the biggest political disaster in the last 50 years, I think, but we're not talking politics. But
we can.
We can too, yeah. But we have real difficulty in the deep tech business. There's real difficulty hiring people in England. And we're now hiring some people from the USA, so we have to pay USA salaries. And, it's at all levels, technician levels, and so there's a real need for more people to do at the university, to do courses in engineering and physical sciences.
I'm curious from you two, what's the most difficult position you had trouble filling?
Well, for us at the moment, at least, data science is a challenge. Diversity in data science is a massive challenge. But I would say, on the Brexit comment, it does really depend also how the business runs. We have an engineering, basically all of our core engineering focus is in Poland. And actually that was due to some of what you've seen here after Brexit, which is that the talent there's just less people. But I do think that there is still an arbitrage on talent versus the cost, as you mentioned earlier. Whereas if you look at Silicon Valley, what you might be paying for a top-level engineer or data scientist is still quite different to what you might be paying in the UK and obviously, factor that against cost of living, I would still say there is quite a gap in that cost versus cost of living. So I would say for us anyway, data science is quite difficult.
I'd probably echo that, and I don't think it's data science because it's the UK or Europe. I just think there's just such a race to what's going on in this space that the big companies are popping up all the great talent. So it's harder for the scale-ups and the smaller companies to be able to attract that talent, and usually that's more of a cultural fit for that data science as opposed to where they want to be placed. But I think, like you described, I mean, we're all having to sort of diversify our engineering pool, and we also work, we have sort of, as you call them, like off-site kitchens and sort of locations where other engineers are working to be able to have that talent available wherever we need it. But we are finding great talent here in the UK as well.
Colin, is there a role that you've struggled to fill?
We've struggled really across the board. So, for technicians, it's difficult. The easiest is probably taking scientists out of universities or PhDs out. It's difficult. We recruit from other companies in the UK. And as I say, our most recent recruit, which is at a senior level, so we want people at a senior level who know about semiconductors, but also know about marketing. It's very important. And we recruited a person he's a British person when we went to America, and we brought him back from America, but at quite a high salary, yes.
Yeah, it's an interesting Venn diagram there, overlap. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, all three of you have also raised capital from overseas. Is that right? Nadine, I'll start with you. What was that process like, most recent fundraise? What were some of anything that was surprising to you about that?
I mean, I think we'd spent, the US is a market for us as well, so it wasn't completely new that we were going to the States. We definitely raised a large chunk of money from the United States, but we'd spent a lot of time even before commercializing in the US and in the run-up, building relationships with those investors over time. So, at the time then that we were raising, a lot of these funds were already preempting, or we had relationships with them. So I think, one thing which, paid off in the long run was making sure we were building those relationships, making sure we were keeping them up to date on what we were doing. And as we were going to the US, exciting them about the potential of that market as well. I think if we were seen as just a company that was delivering technology just for the UK, I don't know that we would have been that exciting, or the town would have been meaningful enough for them to engage. So I think seeing us as a global business based out of the UK, and they were very happy for us to remain headquartered in the UK and sort of as our holding company here. I think that surprised me. Sometimes, you get this, hear these stories of, well, now if you've raised from the US, you have to move and set up, headquartered out of the US, and we didn't have that pressure at all. So that was really interesting.
Pressure from investors.
Pressure from investors, we didn't have that.
And I guess one of the reasons I've heard startups talk about is just want to be close to their customers. I guess yours is maybe a different set of it, but I mean, tell me about that.
Well, in a way, we have customers in Europe, we have customers in the Middle East, we have customers in Asia. So, as long as our core functions for the engineering, the back end, those can be here. Of course, in the US, we have a lot of our customer success managers, our customer-facing individuals are out there, and we place them close to our customers, so that's okay. But we are a global cloud-based platform, so in a way, you could almost be headquartered anywhere, and we chose to be in London.
Phillip, we talked a little bit about your fundraising. Remind me, it was last year? Was that the most recent raise? What was that process like for you?
I think similar to what you're hearing here already, which is the UK's capital is actually almost 50% generally international capital. The US is mostly domestic capital. So, this is what's really interesting about the UK, and even if you look at the LSE, 40 to 50% of the capital is international capital. So, raising money in the UK from international investment or investors shouldn't, I would think it was odd if someone said that they struggled to do that. That is typically what happens. In fact, so much so that this is what you find subsequently goes on with scale-ups in the UKs. They start to raise a lot more capital from international investors. They get a seat on the board, and then there's a lot of pressure to go list in New York somewhere rather than the LSE, and that's typically what you see happen for that reason. So for us, raising capital, international capital for this business in the UK, we didn't feel at all that it was a problem or an issue, and there was a lot of backing for that. I think there is a number of things changing, and obviously you kind of had this peak ZERP era. You had Brexit at the same time, which I think, by the way, created the squeeze on hiring. That was where the problem started. You had Brexit, people kind of a number of people weren't here maybe anymore, and then you had Zilch era, so you had Meta and Google mopping up as much talent as they could just to really hang on to the talent, make it harder for other people to compete, and all of that sort of played through. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens with policy for whoever's in the seat in 4 weeks' time. Policy
You're
is going to
my
play.
next question, so you can just go ahead here. But
Yeah, so policy will play a big role in how much more capital wants to come here and come here as easily as it used to do. I think we're going to have to see what happens on policy before we can really tell.
let's jump to that. So we are 3 weeks away. Is there one policy that you would like to see from either party, and is there one policy that you were terrified of seeing?
So for me, I think the one thing we absolutely need to and must see is clarity of policy.
Okay.
So that is what we absolutely have to have. There are so many policies to discuss thereafter, so to pick or choose one or the other would be difficult.
Do we have clarity now?
No, we don't. So what we're calling for is absolute clarity. Zilch was one of the founders of something called the Unicorn Council. We founded this with Innovate Finance, and the whole concept was take companies. We've got 50 billion of private market cap companies in this council now, and the idea was let's go and create a succinct list of policy and take this directly to Downing Street and policymakers and ask for that change to happen, rather than everyone having these disparate conversations with policymakers. It's very ad hoc and it's very difficult to manage. Yeah. And so we've got a 5-point policy plan that we've presented to them, and this runs the gambit, everything from EIS, SEIS, all the way through to how we deal with VAT, R&D, and of course stamp duty. Julia is obviously here from the LSE, and we're talking about this. The retail investor today can buy a Rolls-Royce share and they pay stamp duty on this. They can buy a Tesla share for free. And that's a real problem. So we want policy that helps the money lean in and support companies who are going to build the economy.
Got it. Nadine, I'll turn to you.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that some at a sort of a general level, and then I'll maybe speak more to sort of health tech and digital tech. But I think, we definitely need to make it easier for companies here, even just to do business across Europe. I mean, that, we find incredibly difficult now, even things with having to host in 2 locations, customs duty, tax. I mean, all these components. I think clarity and incentivizing companies to stay here, build businesses here around those, I think, are going to be critical. And then looking around, what does that mean from tax, DOM, non-DOM, visas? All of that needs more clarity. There's a lot of rumors, there's a lot of noise, expectations, but we don't really know what is that going to look like. And I think that's going to impact a lot of even people that are at Founders Forum, I think, over the next sort of couple of days.
Especially people at Founders Forum.
Well,
right?
that's, yes. And then I think specifically in health tech and digital tech, I tend to be a glass half full person, and I always try to look for the opportunities. But it is challenging. I mean, I think there's this expectation that the NHS is one customer, that the health system is one customer, but it is not. It's basically hundreds of customers. And so, you're coming in, you see a lot of digital tech companies here that are able to do the sort of N-to-1, 0 to 1, 0 to 5, maybe 0 to 10. But trying to then scale across where you're able to get a decision around, right, this is a technology that has demonstrated value for our health system. We're going to deploy this now across 50 of our hospitals, 60 of our hospitals, and we're going to place budget around that to make sure it happens. We don't see for the scale up. We see a lot of, we're going to spend 30 million and sprinkle it across many thousands of flowers to bloom. But we don't see, right, these are the 5 technologies that are really going to transform healthcare, and we need to really fast track those. So you see a lot of digital tech companies that do very well at 5, 10, 15, and then they leave. They go to the US, they go to bigger markets, they go to Germany, they go to France. And we need to really rethink about how we incentivize and help these companies scale within the health system here.
Colin, I'll turn the same question to you. I mean, deeply fascinating space right now, one that the government cares, or at least pays a lot of lip service to. But
Right.
what's the policy that you're most sort of looking forward to, most dreading?
Right, so thank you. So I listened quite carefully to the debates, the political debates on television in the UK recently. And, science wasn't mentioned once. That word didn't appear. Technology, engineering didn't appear. Industry was mentioned once. And so the problem in the UK is, whatever the main political parties are in power, science and technology and industry are really on the bottom rung of the ladder, right? They're hardly discussed in cabinet. I mean, it's only recently the UK science minister sat at the table The previous one couldn't speak. They sat at the table, couldn't speak. And so what we want, I think, is a government who gives much more priority to science, technology, and industry than we have at the moment. I mean, if you look at China, China was, a third world country 50 years ago, and it put science, technology, and industry right at the top of their ladder, right at its top priority. They were investing 25% extra every year on science when their economy was growing at 10% a year, which of course is very high. I mean, but we want a government which really pushes up the investment in science and technology industry. And also when it makes decisions, they ask what effect will these decisions have on industry? That is not done at the moment. I'll just say one more thing, that my company's expanding, and we've moved into a new site for manufacturing in Huntingdon. And we've had all sorts of red tape to overcome. For example, we moved into this building, the electricity supply isn't good enough. In any other country, the local government or the national government would pay for electricity to be delivered to a new technology building. We have to pay to it to be delivered. We have to pay £1 million to get the electricity supplied to the building. It's ridiculous. And then, of course, it's fair enough to pay for the electricity when you use it, but, these costs. And so these are, and then there's all planning regulations. And, other countries make it easy. And we're thinking of going to America just because of the ease of getting things done in America. It's so difficult in England. So there's a lot that needs to be done. And so I want a government which will give more priority to industry, science, and engineering. Amen. Thank you.
Wow. God, preaching to a choir. I know I want to open up to Q&A. I still have a bunch more questions, but if there's anyone in the audience, I think we're just going to ask your question loudly and I'll repeat it. If not, I can go to one here while we're waiting for some thoughtful questions. Can you do a one word? Is there a company that you sort of envy? It doesn't have to be in your sector, but what's the vision of what you want to move to? Philip, anyone start? Whoever wants to start first.
I think Rolls-Royce has gone through some difficult times, but in the UK, Rolls-Royce has been a great company. It's in university, I was director of Rolls-Royce Centre, we were collaborating with it. But if you go back in time, Rolls-Royce was the third largest engine manufacturer for aero engines in the world. There was GE was top, then Pratt & Whitney, then Rolls-Royce. And Rolls-Royce overtook Pratt & Whitney, so they're the second largest in the world. And on the large planes, with the big engines, the Trent engines, for example, Rolls-Royce has the over 50% of the world's airlines, for the big planes, are Rolls-Royce engines. So that's a great engineering company, and I really admire what they've done.
Oh, interesting, actually. I wasn't expecting that. Nadine, do you have one?
When we look at analogies in other sectors and ones that we aspire to, we like the concept of the Salesforce model, because if you think about Salesforce, think of it in three parts, right? You've got the force.com, which is the infrastructure at the base, which is where it's powering other companies, other technologies, as well as their own platforms. They've then built their own applications, their CRM and other components on that. But then they've got this sort of third-party layer where they're making it so much easier for the user, rather than having to log into 17 different systems, is to have that sort of ecosystem. And Proximie really operates with that sort of philosophy. We have the PX core, our infrastructure, which is really that last mile between cloud and the analog room. We have our own applications that we build, your telepresence, your media management. But we now are partnering with third-party technologies that are now leveraging our platform to deploy in the OR. Because as hospital practitioners, you don't have time to log in 17 different systems. You don't want to. You want one system that's just whizzing and doing everything you want for you. And so we see that as a really interesting sort of model that they built. And we've sort of structured a lot of what we do, from infrastructure to application layer to value creation and third party, as sort of an aspiration for us as well.
So are you going to build a big gaudy building and tower in London then?
Well, you never know.
It's quite a building.
Yeah.
Philip?
For us, the parallel we draw that's not in our space is Tesla. So if you look at this business and think of it as a data company rather than a car business, trying to solve something difficult like self-driving, basically they had to go and say, well, the car industry would use dealerships to distribute vehicles. The problem is you have no direct relationship with consumers. you don't have access to first-party data, you can't collect the data, therefore, and build your models. So let's get rid of that distribution model. Let's sell directly to consumers. Let's collect the most amount of data in the world that a car company has ever really seen and use that to build self-driving. In our space, a lot of people compare or think of Zilch as a point-of-sale finance type company, these installment buttons on the checkout page. We really don't like that model. We think it's a commodity, and we think it's similar to the old school car model. You're using retailers to distribute your product. You actually don't own the relationship with the customer at all, and you have downward pressure on pricing, and you can't collect the first-party data. What we're trying to do at Zilch is build a way for us to manage your finances and how you spend with each and every tap or swipe. And so to do that, we need to eliminate this old school distribution model, which would have been the dealership model or on the point of sale, go direct to consumer, which is how we do this, forge that relationship directly with the customer. That enables us to see each and every single transaction, collect first-party data, and use that to build our models and train those models. And this way, we can turn something quite ordinary, a transaction, into something extraordinary. Each and every time you use the product, we re-underwrite you, we understand what's best for you, and which is the best way to pay, now, later, or even later, and at what price. That's the aspiration.
I'd probably say that I think you make such a good point on the data, because it's really exciting. I mean, there's things that you know that you want to already do data, and then there's the unknown unknowns, because once you're actually able to aggregate that data in a really cohesive, comprehensive, structured, safe, secure way, the opportunities become limitless. And we see a vision, I imagine you do too, where the products you're able to build on top of that, the value you're able to unlock on top of that becomes really valuable. But you got to start by laying the piping first, and we basically had to lay the piping, and I assume you've done the same.
Philip, you mentioned it. So you mentioned the London Stock Exchange. You're all, in that sort of pre-IPO world. Are you planning to list here? You do list?
Are you asking if we're planning to list or list here?
Yeah, it's a dual-pronged question.
Okay.
But let's assume you're listing. Where are you going to list?
So we've always said publicly that we want to list the company. So our business is interesting. It's very efficient, but it requires a lot of capital. So, we have to fund our receivables. We have to fund the transaction volume. We look more like a payments company. So for every dollar or pound of debt that we have in the business, we can generate about $30 to $40 of commerce. So very efficient, but you need the capital. Yeah. So being listed obviously provides us lots of different access to different types of capital. And we're really excited about that. We've always said this is where we think we should be. So the short answer to are we listing, we absolutely have an aspiration to do so, and that is the plan. Whether it's here or New York, it's the ongoing debate. We kind of always say we are calling specifically for 5 policies to happen.
Got it.
And if those policies happen, and Julia Hoggett, I mentioned earlier, and the team is here from the LSE, we're really bullish on what we're seeing. Pisces is really exciting. There's a lot of policy that's been promoted and is changing things. Yeah. We really want to see that happen, but for us, it's really, when it comes down to it, it's policy, it's liquidity, and you have to see this, and then it's perception. So for us, if the UK is going to work and work well into the future, we need to see the right policies to promote businesses and help them stay here and grow. And then you need the liquidity. We need to see pension funds, UK pension funds, buying and holding British stocks. And we need to obviously see liquidity, so we must incentivize retail investors to buy and hold British stocks.
I know we're running short of time, so I'll get Nadine and Colin quickly. Same question.
All right, quickly.
Would you list here?
Yeah, so we're looking to list in 4 or 5 years' time. We would love to list in the UK. We very much hope we can, but we will look at the situation in 4 or 5 years' time and see what it's like.
Okay. Nadine?
I think from our perspective, we're at the moment head down focused on growing our footprint in the business. But I would probably echo what Philip said. We need to make sure that the UK becomes exciting and incentivizes people to list here. But from our perspective at Proximie, we're head down focused on expanding the value for health systems.
Big, strong maybes across the board. Yeah. Appreciate that. Thank you so much for all 3 of you. Excited to come back next year and talk even more about IPOs. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, thank you to our panel. I just want to make a quick announcement before we go to lunch. I'd hate to stand between hungry founders and their lunch, but we are going to have an event in here in the next period. So if you'd like to head to the farm food tent for a bite to eat, and it would be good if you come back here at 2:00, because we're going to have a special episode of the High Performance Podcast with Dr. Deepak Chopra. And I know you come to Soho Farmhouse for chill. He is the man synonymous with mindfulness. So I'm sure you'll be back for that. Thank you very much.